Okay, so in this video, I'm gonna go through my entire full transformation. If you don't know me, my name is Hamid. I'm 16 years old now, and I became a polyglot at 13 years old after getting fluent in Spanish. So in this video, I'm gonna sort of go through my entire story. So we'll start from the beginning, okay? And by the way, this isn't like a normal type of my videos. I'm not gonna actually teach any new frameworks. This is just me showing you my progress if anyone's interested. So I was born in Sweden, if you don't know, and even though I was born and raised in Sweden, ethnically my entire family is from Azerbaijan, which is basically a country right next to Turkey. So the language is very similar to Turkish. Now, growing up, I spoke English a lot. So we'll start with just Azerbaijani. So I actually don't know what my first language was because even though at home we only spoke Azerbaijani, of course we would also use some Swedish words in between when we didn't know what to say, especially speaking with our parents. But generally, I would say my first language, the first one I learned, not my best language, but the first one I learned was probably Azerbaijani. But around when I was like 3 or 4 years old, that's when we started getting into kindergarten. So 4 or 5 years old. And we went to an international kindergarten where you speak English basically. And then growing up, because my brother learned English first, he would like I basically followed in his lead. So then we'd watch like Minecraft YouTubers and stuff in English. And then at school or at kindergarten rather, we would speak only English. And so English started becoming like my main, like very strong language. So I would say my first language was English and that my second language is Azerbaijani, even though I probably spoke Azerbaijani before speaking English, if that makes sense. And then after kindergarten, I went to a Swedish school. So I was speaking English with my cousins. We always speak English between our siblings and our cousins. And it became kind of like this thing where our parents didn't really speak English and we only spoke English with each other. So they didn't really understand us. So then after kindergarten, I just went to a regular Swedish school and spoke Swedish, right? And so technically, I would say Swedish is actually my third language because basically during kindergarten, I didn't really speak it at all. Almost didn't really speak it. I was saying we could say things, but like we didn't speak it with anyone. We just kind of spoke it outside of school, but we could still speak it, but we weren't like fluent, I don't think. But then when we left kindergarten and joined like a regular school in Sweden, you start in 0th grade where you're 6 years old basically. And basically from there all the way up until now, basically, I've went to like a Swedish speaking school. So I basically spoke Swedish and learned Swedish like that. And that was until around 7th grade. So in 6th grade, we had to choose between either Spanish and French. And in some schools, they also have German as an option. So if you don't know Sweden, you have to know Swedish, English, and then you also have to choose a third language to study, which is really nice, right? Now, obviously, I already spoke 3 languages just growing up, right? So I just chose Spanish because it was the easiest one. And so first year in 6th grade, I didn't really care about Spanish, but then 7th grade came around and I saw this YouTuber named Language Lords, other YouTubers called Shauma and Ikena. And that sort of got me interested into the language learning. Now, before I get into the actual language learning journey, I want to show you the transformation. So I got fluent after the summer of 2022. Now, in this, I'm going to show you a video now of how my Spanish sounded before then and then after then.
Hola, estoy comiendo comida. Podré, podré comprender shows de español. Para mejorar mi español cuando no tengo mucho tiempo libre para estudiar español, voy a hablar español cuando tengo tiempo libre, pero no sé, no como en serio. Hola, me llamo Hamid, y ahora ha pasado más o menos 3 meses. No tuve mucho de tiempo, porque no sé por qué no me gustaría seguir estudiando el español, porque he estudiado el español mucho y no sé, tal vez no quiero seguir hablando, no quiero seguir estudiando por eso.
And so as you could hear, before the summer, A1 sort of beginner, and after the summer, I was actually, that's when I was conversation fluent. And I know I was because I went on like a call with a native after that summer and I was able to speak completely fluently. And I actually gave these audios to AI to analyze my sort of transformation. And so according to AI listening and studying my transformation, so before the summer, I was at 30 hours of studying, and that was the first recording you could hear. and that was according to AI, the A1 level. And then after summer, after 120 hours total of studying, according to AI, it was like a solid B1 level. And so according to AI, that means that I saved around 200 to 250 hours of studying compared to the average learner, which is insane. And even for those saying that I had an advantage because I already spoke English, Swedish, and Azerbaijani, according to AI, analyzing that context, I did have a head start, but that the progress is still like well above average, even within that advantage group that I had. And it wasn't even that big of an advantage because if you think about it, like Azerbaijani is a Turkic language. There's no like connection to Spanish. And English and Swedish are Germanic languages, and they're pretty much the same language in terms of like Latin roots and connection to Spanish because of Latin, right? But you watching this, you also speak English, so you basically have no better advantage. I guess the only advantage that AI recognizes, which I asked about, was basically that because I already spoke 3 languages, it shows that I have like a more linguistic competence in language. So even though I did have a head start, I still saved a ton of time studying the way I did. And so after that summer, though, after the summer of 2022, I basically didn't study at all. So I even put an audio of 3 months after the summer where my Spanish, you could hear my Spanish, how it was, right? So I basically didn't study at all after that summer. And you can see in the audio, I explain why. It's because I don't want to study a lot because I'd already studied the entire summer. And by the way, you can also hear that I sound like I'm in 7th grade because I actually was in 7th grade. I was 13, I think. But to not lose my Spanish completely, I went on semi-weekly calls with natives on Hello Talk for like 30 minutes, 20 minutes every week or so, right? Semi-weekly, like not that consistently, just so I could not lose my Spanish. And then every now and then, I would also rewatch some of my transcript training videos. If you don't know what transcript training is, it's one of my methods that I did, one of my exercises that I did in the summer of 2022 to get fluent, right? But these hours are extremely negligible in terms of hours spent studying because these hours are like 10-minute conversations every week or 20, 30-minute conversations every week or so. It's very negligible. So basically, throughout 2022 and 2024, I basically did basically nothing for Spanish. Maybe 10 hours, maybe 5 hours of studying, 5 to 10 hours of studying. And that's like generous. Now, that was until early beginning of 2024. So near early 2024, our Spanish class actually had a trip to Spain, specifically Sevilla. And so in this trip, it was like an exchange trip. Basically, I would sort of connect with a Spanish speaking student that's in my sort of age group. And we would come to Spain and we would stay with their family. They would come to Sweden and they would stay with our family, obviously together, right? So I would go there first, then I'd go back and then they would come to Sweden. And so in this time, I actually lived with a Spanish speaking family for a week. And this was like the best immersion ever. And the best part was that we only spoke Spanish with each other since their parents didn't speak any Spanish. And my language partner did speak English, but for some reason, when we were at his house, he spoke Spanish with me, which sometimes we speak English, right? But basically, I was immersed in Spanish. I was living with these Spanish people. And like at this point, my Spanish was still not great. Like my Spanish, even now, I wouldn't say it's perfect or great at all, but still conversational. And that's like the whole gist of my learning. It's never perfect. You ask a native, they're not going to say it's perfect. They're not going to say that I sound super native, even though that's my end goal, right? But they're going to say it's conversational because it is conversational. I was able, like when I was in Spain, I was able to communicate with everyone, even though I wasn't perfect. Like my accent wasn't perfect, my like speed of speaking wasn't perfect, but I was conversational, and that's sort of my goal, right? That's sort of the whole goal of this. Now, in the beginning of the summer, that's when I started uploading these Spanish videos, and that's also around the time that I started my trying to get to native fluency series. And so, if you're interested in seeing my progress there, you can check those videos out to see how my Spanish has improved. And so now I have realistically studied around about 180 or so hours of Spanish. And actually, like that's time spent studying. But again, keep in mind that 120 of those were in a 6-month period and 90 of those were in a 3-month period, which was the summer of 2022. And so the whole 180 hours was spread across 3 years. And that's a really important point when it comes to Spanish and when it comes to learning, okay? Because the time that I had spent studying Spanish is such a long period, I've had more time to sort of sleep on Spanish concepts. And that helps you so much more than you realize when it comes to understanding, like actually understanding concepts, okay? Let's say I did it in 2 months, like the 180 hours, I put it into 2 months of Spanish. 3 hours a day, 2 months. Yeah. So that would be 3 hours a day for 2 months straight. I would probably still be conversational, but I wouldn't say my Spanish would be at the same level. Now my Spanish is at like a very, very fluent conversational level. I would still not say it's natively fluent, but it's definitely up there it's very conversational. I'm able to like scroll on TikTok in Spanish, like watching Spanish videos. My phone is set to Spanish, etc. Now, the benefits of getting like conversational are just so like great. Like, for example, not only being able to go to Spain and actually speak Spanish there and actually speak Spanish for everyone there. Like there's like a street vendor. I would just go up to them and be like, "Oh yeah, did you know that we're actually from Sweden? We're coming here from Sweden." And then they're like, "Oh, can you tell me more about that?" And then I explain, oh, "Okay, we have a language exchange program or thing, etc." Or for example, in Sweden, if you don't know, what you guys call like high school is called like gymnasium in Sweden, and ninth grade is like the last grade of like the grundskola, like the small school, middle school, or not high school, but whatever. I don't know how to describe it. You get it, right? The middle school, basically. And you basically switch schools. Like you guaranteed have to switch schools to a gymnasium, basically. So there's a bunch of schools, and then there's gymnasiums. And for gymnasiums, there's something called öppet hus, which means like open house, where the people, like the gymnasiums, allow like students, like ninth graders, to check out their schools. And what me and my friends had done is like go obviously check out a bunch of the new gymnasiums. And one of these gymnasiums, basically for a lot of these gymnasiums, I would go there and find the Spanish teacher and just strike a conversation. Like I remember one of these, we went to one gymnasium and I went to a Spanish teacher. We had like a 5, 10, 15-minute conversation. And he sort of told me like, okay, he's born and raised in Sweden, but he went to Peru and to Argentina to study Spanish. I remember another time I was taking the bus back to one of our lessons, and there was like this blind lady. I'm not sure if she was blind, but she had something in her eye or so. Like her eyes were like distilled, or I don't know how to explain it. But she basically, like, we had a conversation, and then she told me like, oh, she's a Spanish teacher. And I was like, oh, really? And then I started speaking Spanish with her, and we spoke Spanish for the rest of the rest of the bus ride, which was really fun as well. Like that's what I mean by conversational. My Spanish was not perfect, but every person I really talked to, like in Spanish, I'm able to have the talk, have the conversation, right? And by the way, I have a video online, by the way, as well, where I spoke Spanish for a week. You might want to check that one out to also sort of see where it's at now. I remember another time I was taking the elevator, and one of my neighbors had like held the door for me, or like the elevator thing. And then he's like, he barely spoke Swedish. So then he was like, oh, in broken Swedish, he was like, oh, I'm from Spain. And then I was like, oh, really? Do you speak Spanish? And I said, hablas español? And then he was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And then what he did, this is why I love like Spanish people, they're so social. He got off, like when it was my turn to get off, he got off on the same floor as me. And we literally had like a 30-minute discussion right then and there, standing. I told him like, oh, I learned Spanish during the summer, like a few years ago. And like I went to Spain and stuff like that, right? I told him all about that. And he was explaining sort of where the Spanish language came from. I was asking to teach me some slang, stuff like that, right? And then when I would like see him like walk out of his house with his dog or something, I would be like, hey, what's up? Hola, stuff like that. When I got a buzz cut, for example, he was like, oh, te queda bien. Like, oh, it looks good on you. Or like, yeah. And then I was like, oh, gracias, thank you. So stuff like that, right? Basically, like now my goal for this year is to actually reach native fluency, which I think I'm very close to. I'm able to really, bueno, puedo seguir hablando español para mostrarte, ¿no? No sé, pero este verano mi objetivo es alcanzar un nivel activo. O sea, quiero hablar como nativo, quiero sonar como nativo, which I plan on achieving this summer. And also, I'm going to update my Trying to Reach Native Fluency series during the summer, and hopefully you'll see my progress there. My goal is to reach around 200 hours, 250 hours, which by the way, to reach a conversational level for most people takes around about 600 hours. And that should tell you a lot about, the method. And honestly, I'm extremely grateful for the progress I've made and the fact that I like even discovered this like method. Because during the summer, I tried a bunch of different methods and I sort of found my own path of how to do it. And I'm just so grateful for that because like basically for the rest of my life, I can speak fluent Spanish. Like think about that. Just because of one summer break that in 6th grade to 7th grade, basically the transition from 6th grade to 7th grade, just because I spent that 3-month period learning Spanish, that now I'm fluent in Spanish for the rest of my life. I'm a polyglot for the rest of my life. How sick is that? I grew up knowing 3 languages. I just had to learn one more language and now I'm a polyglot. Isn't that like just so incredible? All for like 120 hours in, and now I've done 180 hours of studying. I'm just so grateful for the progress I've made because like the benefits are like unimaginable. I literally get straight A's in Spanish, like without even studying. I don't even come to the lessons. My teacher doesn't get mad at me, but I like write to her a message like, oh, I'll be late this lesson. And then I didn't even show up to like the lessons. It's like, you know what I mean? But it's because I don't need to. Like literally on test day, I show up to the test day, and then the teacher tells us, "Oh, we have a test today." I'm like, "Wait, what?" When? Who told us this? And then I do the test and I get a straight A, of course. Literal straight A's in Spanish for the rest of like the entirety of my school career. I'm able to connect with natives. Like the amount of benefits you get from just spending like that little time doing the correct method is just so incredible. And it's not just me. If you don't know, I also teach Spanish. And other people literally have experienced very similar benefits, such as, for example, one of them, he said that he was kind of embarrassed. He was like, I mean, it's so bad, it's embarrassing. I'm much better now. Referring to like him recording himself making videos of him speaking Spanish. He finds it sort of embarrassing. And then he says, it'll be 3 weeks this Sunday since he started with my program. And I can already speak in full sentences, which is insane. And then, for example, another one, this guy's like very young, 14, 15 years old. And he said his Spanish here wasn't really that accurate, but he was trying to say, today I spoke with 2 natives in only Spanish. Like I had a conversation with 2 natives. And he said, like, I understood him completely fine because I did the transcript training, which is one of the methods that I teach. And he had a conversation about bad words in Spanish, which was fun. And even I found like a YouTube comment of this guy saying that he has a friend who used my methods and is now B1, which is basically like conversational almost. And he started 3 months ago. So I'm super grateful that I was also able to help a lot of people with my frameworks. So if you actually want to implement my frameworks and finally start learning Spanish in a clear and structured way, then you can check the description if you're interested in my program. So I know this is kind of a different video. I just want to show you some of my progress, but I hope you enjoyed it and stay humble.